You're listening to Lexington Community Radio, WLXU 93.9, and this is Bike Talk.
Bluegrass Cycling Club is proud to support Bike Talk as an underwriter for Lexington Community Radio. For more information, you may visit bgcycling.net. Hi, I'm your host, Wanda Bertram. Today we are joined by Jim Sayer. Jim is the Executive Director of Adventure Cycling. Jim, it's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here.
Adventure Cycling, that's a really cool organization. You're based in Montana. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, well, I've been with Adventure Cycling for longer than I care to admit. I was hired as the Executive Director almost 14 years ago, and it's been a great ride so far. But I've worked a lot in nonprofits, public service, but bicycling is one of my passions. So when I saw this opportunity, I leapt at it. Some of your listeners may know the organization as Bike Centennial because we were founded way back in 1976 as Bike Centennial. And it was a group formed to do a tour across the country on the Trans-America Trail. And they had 4,100 people do all or part of that from Virginia to Oregon.
Wow.
Yeah, and they didn't do it in one big peloton or a big group. They did it's individuals or in small groups, but they rode one way or the other, east, west, west, east. And 4,100 people did all or part of it. And it was to celebrate the bicentennial of the country, but also to demonstrate the power of bicycling.
And that kicked off a whole movement, it sounds like.
Back in the 70s, bicycling had one of its last major renaissances, probably before now. People not only did it to travel by bike over multiple days, but that also kicked off a period where a lot more people were commuting by bike. And it also aligned with the oil crises back in the late 70s. So people were looking at alternative ways of moving around besides the automobile. So there was a big renaissance. You saw a surge in bike sales. You saw a surge in the number of people that were biking. And part of that was triggered by Bike Centennial.
So Adventure Cycling rose out of that movement.
Exactly. And that was a nonprofit. And then eventually in the early 90s, the group changed its name to Adventure Cycling Association. And now we're the largest cycling membership group in North America. We have about 53,000 members, mostly in the U.S., but all over. All kinds of people. Some are armchair cyclists, but mostly they're people who are really passionate about cycling and bicycle travel.
And what kind of benefits do you offer to the members?
We have a lot of great benefits. We offer a tremendous magazine called Adventure Cyclist. It's won many awards.
It's a beautiful magazine.
Well, thank you. And it is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It has great photography, great articles, very inspiring about people riding their bikes all over the world from Kazakhstan, but also in small cities, even in the U.S. Bike travel takes many forms. That's featured in the magazine. We also have many other benefits that are too many to enumerate here, but we have bike-friendly maps and routes that we sell, and you get a discount as a member. And you can go on one of our tours, which are more budget-oriented, but only members can go on those tours. And we have about 100 tours plus instructional courses on bike travel every year. And then, as I said, there's a whole bunch of other benefits. You can get discounts on a variety of products and services.
Well, and I've heard you say that cycling opens doors like nothing else.
Yeah, well, especially the bicycle. When you're on a bike and when you're traveling, it's amazing. One of our columnists for the magazine, a wonderful guy named Willie Ware, very engaging, said the bicycle is the friendliest vehicle ever created because when you get on it, and especially if you're carrying some kind of gear on it, whether it's just your clothes or a huge kit that is your sleep stuff, everything. And when people see you come up and you're probably a little bit sweaty and tired, they immediately come up to you and they start asking you the questions about who you are, where you're from, where you're going, because people are inspired by journeys.
They are, and it's cool.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people will come up to you and ask that, and even more so, how many people will then turn around and ask you what you need. We have so many stories of people who have just been saved by other people or just offered a place to stay for the night or a meal. It's wonderful to hear these stories, and not just in the U.S., but overseas. It's one of the great levelers, one of the great ways for people to connect with people in other cultures.
And there's very little economic barriers to doing this as well. You told one story about a guy mowing lawns.
Yeah, Blaine. We track all the people who ride through our offices, and we're headquartered in Missoula, Montana, which is not near anywhere, or at least no other big cities. So,
you can't get there from here.
well, you can, but it's harder than going from, like, say, Lexington to Cincinnati, right? So people have to travel, and so we treat everybody who arrives there like gods or goddesses. And if you do ride to Missoula and come to our offices, we will give you free ice cream and soda and
It's
take
a
your
must
picture.
stop. Yeah.
We have a wall of fame in the front of our office where we have pictures and information about all the people that ride through that year. And this year we'll probably have about 1,200 people who will ride into Missoula on their own power.
You're a very hospitable organization.
We
if you have that many
try to
people
be.
dropping
Well,
in.
we have to honor that kind of effort. But Blaine was an interesting guy because he had a trailer on his bike, a bob trailer for those of you in the know. But he carried on top of it in his gear a push mower, a real push
kidding.
mower.
That's wild.
No electric or diesel power in that thing. So he carried that across the country, and so to support his cross-country tour, he mowed lawns, and he made it, and he supported himself, and he certainly generated a lot of stories in the process.
I bet he did. I bet a lot of people stopped to talk to him. Why the mower, man?
Absolutely. Give me a cut.
Yeah, give me a cut.
Yeah.
I'll give you $10. Yeah, that'll buy lunch.
Yeah.
So Jim, tell me, what's your story? How did you get into this? Into cycling? What drove your passion?
It's hard to say. I started later in life. I lived in a mountainous town in California, and my parents, for some reason, I didn't ask for a bike, or my parents didn't give me one like most kids get it early in life. So I was about 10 or 11. But once I had it, I really enjoyed it, and I loved that feeling of liberation you got from being on a bike. I kept doing it, and eventually was riding all the time when I was in high school and when I was in college. I went to UC Santa Barbara, and I also went for 1 year to Scotland, and I went to the University of Edinburgh, a great university, and I lived right in the heart of the city. And for some strange reason, I hit on this idea to do a bike trip on my own because I was finishing my finals earlier than all my friends, so I had an extra week. So I figured, why not try this?
Why not?
So I rented this really heavy bike and got some panniers to put on the back. And I did all the things you probably shouldn't do. Like I carried super heavy canned food, things like that. I wasn't even thinking. But somehow I still survived.
Learned by experience.
Yeah, and I rode right from where I lived in Edinburgh out the city over to the Isle of Mull, the Isle of Skye, and eventually came back over to the town of Inverness, which is on the east side of Scotland, and then took the train back to Edinburgh. And it was a revelation. It was really fantastic to be operating under my own power. I met kindred spirits, other people riding. So that was my first real bike tour overnight. And it stuck in my mind. And I didn't get into this job until many years later, after a career in public service and other nonprofits.
And now your family. You talked a little bit about your family and how you take your daughters on cross-country bike trips.
Our whole family has gotten into bike travel. I hope it hasn't been because I've been forcing them, but they seem to want to do it again after we've done it. And we've tried.
A big sign.
You never know. I mean, it's there's that parental authority thing, but we have 3 daughters, my wife and I, and we've done a number of trips. Our whole family a while ago about 8 years ago, did a wonderful tour down the entire Pacific coast, and we carried our own gear. And our girls at the time were only 13, 11, 11, obviously twins. And they carried their own clothing. They carried their own books, oftentimes many books, I can believe it, and their sleep kit. And my older daughter, the 13-year-old, would insist on towing one of the trailers every other day. And she always wanted to tow it on the hardest days.
You've got to love her.
Yeah, it became a point of pride. And it carried over to where we've done a number of other tours I could tell you about. But what was really exciting this year was that she decided, she's just about to finish college, she has 1 more year, but she decided to lead bike tours for a company called Overland that takes kids. So she took a bunch of 14-year-olds on tours of Cape Cod, Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard. And they weren't luxury tours. They were camping, they were carrying their own gear. Most of the kids hadn't done this, and they stayed in campgrounds and hostels. So she did that all summer long, and so it's obviously carried forward to some extent.
Yeah, it's a huge growing experience and learning experience.
Yeah.
How fun. Well, we're going to take a short break, so stay tuned in. We'll be right back with Jim Sayer and Adventure Cycling. Welcome back to Bike Talk on Lexington Community Radio. I'm your host, Wanda Bertram. Today we're joined by Jim Sayer, who's the Executive Director of Adventure Cycling based in Missoula, Montana. And we've been talking about the many ways to get out and explore the countryside on bike. And adventure cycling is there to help cyclists do just that in many ways.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons I took the job at Adventure Cycling was because we have such a variety of programs and really good ones. You really can't find the things that we do anywhere else. So I mentioned that we have this fantastic magazine that gives you inspiration to go all over the world and information. And we have a wonderful website, all the social media channels. You can find everything at adventurecycling.org. It's all free and available. You don't have to be a member to access that information. So if you're a first timer or if you're a veteran rider, there's lots of information for you. And we also have forums online that you can ask all sorts of questions about types of bikes, places to go, places to see, other information that you might need to try and travel by bike. So those are all available, lots of information, and that's not just for members.
And I love that it's free, that anyone can go to your website and start getting what they need to get out and ride.
We are a nonprofit, and so that's our charitable mission, is to inspire and empower people to travel by bicycle. And so we just feel good when we get anybody over the threshold of should I or shouldn't I. And it's amazing to me how many cyclists I've met over the years, really experienced cyclists who've never done an overnight bike trip. For whatever reason, they just ride for one day and go home or go back wherever they started, but they don't do an overnight trip. And so we often tell those people, look, bike travel is just like a great bike ride, except it keeps going and going and going. How could that be bad? And we are seeing more people discover it, both new and old. That's very exciting. And the other great thing about bike travel right now is that it's part of the whole trend towards active and adventure travel. It's one of the fastest growing segments in the overall travel industry. And it's because we're seeing people who want to be active during their vacation. In fact, they're seeing the journey as part of the vacation, whereas the journey used to be this onerous, horrendous experience, right? When you get on the plane or whatever and have to get somewhere, and then you get to that place and you just stop and sit, and that's it. But now people are increasingly using the time for their vacation or their getaway to actually do something. And so it could be biking, it could be hiking, it could be paddling, but they really want an active vacation.
And you have so many tools to help them do that. Tell me about your routes.
Back in '76, we created the Trans-America Trail. And trail's a little bit misleading only because it's mostly on roads or hard-packed trails. So you're mostly riding on country roads, but it's 4,200 miles from Yorktown, Virginia to Astoria, Oregon. Wonderful route through mostly countryside, and you see all these great things about the United States of America. And after that, we began to create other routes too. So now we've created over 47,000 miles of routes.
No kidding.
All over the
amazing.
U.S. Yeah, all over the U.S. and Canada. And I was told that that's almost the equivalent of riding around the planet twice at the equator. So it's a lot of riding. So you better get going.
Yeah, the time to start is now.
Yeah, no, they're mostly paved routes, but we also do off-road dirt routes. And the most famous is the Great Divide mountain bike route. And that runs, and we've just revised it. It's 20th anniversary this year in 2018. And we run that one from Jasper National Park up in Canada all the way to the New Mexico border. It's about 2,700 miles, and it's mostly on off-pavement dirt roads through public lands like BLM or Forest Service lands. And
I love it.
It's amazing. Everybody comes back truly transformed because parts of that you are not near any civilization whatsoever. And there's even an amazing race that's not official but called the Tour Divide that runs starting in June. That's one of our off-pavement routes, and we're actually working on one in Arkansas. It's called the Arkansas High Country Route, and it's in northwest Arkansas. It's 1,100 miles of gravel connecting all these cool single-track trails for mountain bikers.
That's amazing.
We have an Idaho Hot Springs mountain bike route, which is about 500 miles of gravel goodness, and that connects other single-track, and it goes past over 50 hot springs that are both primitive or developed, but they're really close to the route, so you can every day end your ride with a hot spring.
The hot spring.
Pretty nice, huh?
Oh, that's awesome.
But the paved routes are great. And we have 3 cross-country, Trans Am, a northern tier that goes from Anacortes, Washington, kind of near the San Juan Islands to Bar Harbor, Maine. And we have a southern tier that runs from San Diego, California to St. Augustine, Florida. And that's the shortest and about 3,000 miles. And I just did that last year with one of my daughters. It was lucky that I got one of my daughters, who at the time was 19, and she and I had done several trips before. And I said, "Do you want to go on this?" Because she had a gap semester. And yeah, well, no, it was good. It was great. I mean, it ended up being a really great thing. And so she said, "Yeah," and because we had done it before, and she knew what to expect, and it ended up being the trip of a lifetime. It always is, but it was amazing because we started at my mom's house in Long Beach, California. She just turned 80, and we rode down from there to San Diego about 100 miles and then turned left and never stopped. We just rode right across all of Texas and Bayou country and eventually ended up at St. Augustine and Jacksonville, Florida.
And the word you used was transforming, that it really changes how people see the world. It changes them for the rest of their lives.
It does. There's a new movement afoot in general, culturally, for slowing things down because we're in such a hyperspeed era between digital media and everything else. People just have a lot on their plates and they're moving fast. And it's always great to slow down, whether it's with your food or your experiences or meditation, whatever it takes. But bike travel obviously is slower. You're usually gonna, with gear, be only traveling at 10 to 15 miles an hour. And it's just such a perfect speed because you can cover, 50, 60, 70 miles in a day and really feel like you're getting somewhere. But by the same token, you're really able to see and smell and feel. And usually that works to your advantage. Once in a while, you're going to get hit by that rainstorm or snow or something.
You're not going to get a cell signal all the time.
Yeah. You're going to be out of touch a few times, but mostly it's just the most extraordinary thing to be able to really experience the world in all its beauty. And it's an amazing experience. So it was for us on the southern tier because there you're going through desert, high desert, beautiful mountain ranges in the west. And then you go through West Texas, which some people think is interminable, but we thought was beautiful. And you go through some really great cities on that route too. So you are in the countryside a lot, but then you get to go through Phoenix, and we saw friends there, stayed with them. We go through Austin, Texas. They now have great bike paths that take you right into the heart of the city. And then we also went to New Orleans, and that was fantastic. And we ended up on the coast of the Atlantic coast. It was great.
Awesome. Well, and I understand several of these routes even go through Kentucky.
They do. We have lots of routes that go through Kentucky. The Trans Am is one of them, right from the beginning. We also have a Great Rivers South that goes through Kentucky, and the Underground Railroad bicycle route, which we created in partnership with the Center for Minority Health at the University of Pittsburgh, because there was no one Underground Railroad route. So we worked with an advisory board on how to create that. And that's a sign of how meticulous we are in terms of creating a route that is true to history and the culture of the country, but also that's bike friendly. We look for the best possible routes that make for a great riding experience.
Well, and so obviously you work with communities to help develop those systems and those routes.
To a great extent we do, and we're finding more and more communities that want bike routes coming through. At first we were an oddity or a curiosity, and now they realize that, especially small communities that have been bypassed by the interstates, they see real economic benefit in having these bike routes because it generates thousands of visits that normally wouldn't happen. And as we've discovered through research, cyclists spend more than the average tourist. We found in Montana, my home state, that normally tourists spend about $58, and the average bike tourist was spending about $75 every day. Because we're ravenous, we need a lot more services, we lose stuff, we break stuff a lot more readily, and we don't have a station wagon carrying everything under the sun on their trip. So we don't, have a lot of capacity, so we tend to spend more. So small towns are catching on to this and even creating free bike camps where you can spend the night there, get a shower or shelter, and the benefit for the community, it doesn't cost them a lot to build these. And within a couple of years, they've paid it off because through donations and then through people spending money in their towns, they're getting, they're covering the cost of that new bike camp.
Yeah, so huge economic development benefits, tourism, especially in areas that often need it the most.
Yeah, like in rural Kentucky, we've heard of communities that have really benefited in that way. But all over the country, we're seeing more bike hostels, bike camps spring up because people want to have that sticky site where a tired cyclist is going to come in and see that and realize it's an oasis and stay there and spend money there in their town.
I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Let's do it. But first, we're going to take another break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Bike Talk on Lexington Community Radio. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Wanda Bertram, and today we're talking with Jim Sayer, who's the executive director of a really cool organization called Adventure Cycling. We've been talking about the many thousands of miles of routes that they have crisscrossing the country, two that go through Kentucky, and all the communities that benefit through tourism and economic development. And I'm ready to go, Jim. So obviously people can just go out the door and find these routes in Kentucky, but you offer tours. So if I want to go explore other areas and I'm not familiar with them, I can pick up on these tours.
Right. And let me also say that we see many companies now offering bike tours. So, if you just go online, search engine, and find, different companies that do tours, you could find something that's good for you. Because some people want a really luxurious tour. And so there are companies that offer that for $400 or $500 a day, where you get a nice indoor accommodation and great meals and all that stuff and vehicle support. And then we offer a mix of things that are more at the budget level. We think it's really important just to create an easier entry for people. So we do what we're called self-contained tours, where you carry your own gear and you cook your own food, but you have a guide and we set up all the logistics for your tour. And that can be for any amount of time, from 1 week to 3 months, if you want to ride across country with us on one of our routes. So that's one way you can do it. We also have van supported tours, and we have fully supported tours like you see with a lot of big events, but ours tend to be for smaller groups. So the self-contained rides, the van supported rides have about 13 or 14 maximum people. And then we have supported rides for 40 to 80 people, where you have a caterer, a bike mechanic, water stops. All that stuff is available to you, and all you have to do is ride and really not carry a lot, which is a nice way to go, especially if you're just starting out.
Yeah, and you have people there to support you that can help you figure it out.
Exactly.
If you're new to this.
Yeah, we have experienced tour guides in all the different types of tours. We even have a couple of instructional courses. One is called Intro to Road Touring. Another is Intro to Dirt Touring, so you can tell the difference there. But that's a little mini tour with a couple-day seminar on the start to give you all the advice and info you need to travel.
Well, that's perfect.
Yeah, so you could do that. Or we also have a leadership training course, and that's where we draw our leaders from. We find really great people, and we offer usually 4 or 5 or 6 of those every year. So we teach about 120 to 130 people about how to lead bike tours. And frankly, a big part of it is just the interpersonal dynamics. How do you work with people, especially in sometimes stressful situations when you're out on a bike tour? So we offer those, and these are all over the country. I mentioned that we do some across country, like on Trans Am or Southern Tier. The Southern Tier is very popular, but we also offer 1 or 2 week tours in places like the Cascades and the San Juan Islands. And we also do, I'm thinking, like Death Valley is a very interesting one for people. It's early spring. They can get going on their cycling year in March and do a 1 week tour around Death Valley. It's gorgeous, gorgeous cycling too. So all sorts of places, including in the East, Midwest. We don't stint on any one region.
So I love it. They're all over the country. Mm-hmm. What are some of the locations you go to in the Eastern United States?
We've done different rides. We also do inn-to-inns, we call them, and then you can stay indoors and eat restaurant food, but you carry your own clothing and repair kit, and there's no vehicle support, which is quite unusual. Usually, most tour companies, they offer that, but we have a cool one up in Vermont and around Lake Champlain. We have and we have another one in Maine. That's an inn-to-inn there. We have a Mid-Atlantic ride that's pretty cool. That's right between Philadelphia and D.C. We run a number of tours down in Florida that's very popular on both the Gulf Coast and on the Atlantic side. A whole variety of places that we do these. Natchez Trace is very popular too. Actually, we've been impressed by how many people have been buying into that tour.
Oh, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Now, do you get to go on these tours occasionally?
I can if I want, but I oftentimes do my own. But this year I joined our Trans Am for the last 2 weeks of their tour from Missoula over to the Pacific Coast, and it was really awesome. Our tour leaders were working really hard. People by then had done 3,500 miles, so they were a pretty well-oiled unit. And we did some fantastic riding all the way through high desert country in eastern Oregon. We went through canyonlands and riverlands in Idaho. And eventually you pop out, you go over this really amazing, iconic pass called Mackenzie Pass.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know Mackenzie Pass.
Oh my gosh. Well,
beautiful.
That's good. Yeah. And it goes through a lava field on the one side, black lava, and then you get to the top and you zoom down the other side into lush green Northwest forest.
Gorgeous.
Amazing. And then you get to the Mackenzie River, which is just spectacularly
phenomenal.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's so cold, even in late July. And then you go from there over to Eugene, Oregon, college town, and then you go through the Coast Range over to Florence, Oregon.
And you've experienced such a diversity of terrain in just a relatively short area.
And I only did the 800 miles. It made me regretful that I hadn't been able to do the whole thing. But I did hear a lot of stories about the earlier parts of the trip. And again, people had their challenges. But in that one, there was a band to support you. So it was a little easier than the self-contained. But we actually got together one night in Baker City, Oregon, Eastern Oregon, really cool little town that has benefited greatly from bike tourism. And we were able to join one night with our self-contained group. They were just a day behind us. So we were on our layover day relaxing, and then they came into town. So we did a birthday party for one of their participants. But they were reveling in all the little luxuries that we had in our van, like coolers, and we even had folding chairs. That for them,
folding chairs.
I mean, they were like,
they
were like camp chairs. They were like, oh my gosh, this is just phenomenal. Thank you so much. So I don't want to make it seem like privation, but there's the benefits of the self-contained, and then the benefits of the supported, and they're both great.
You've touched on one thing that I love so much about cycling, and why I started cycling was to be able to get out in the countryside, even here around Lexington into the horse country, and be able to touch and smell and feel and really experience the world around us. And you don't get that in a car.
Not at all. In fact, I'm so lucky in my job because I meet people like you and other folks from like the Bluegrass Cycling Club, and they took me on a ride out through Bluegrass country. Just a quickie.
Thank you, Randy Thomas, for that. Yeah.
Just 30 miles, but we did a nice little loop. We went over by Woodford Reserve. It was really, really fantastic. And again, we had the nicest time just, seeing the landscape, feeling
Going
it.
slow,
Yeah.
just stopping when we wanted to stop.
Yeah, exactly. So it's great. You can go fast, slow, whatever. You set the pace, but also the roads were really nice and very low traffic.
One thing that is very unique about your organization and the tours that you lead and that you offer is that it goes to a greater cause. You also do advocacy.
We do. We take the net proceeds from sales of our maps and sales of our tours, and we have many members who donate. Over 3,000, actually 4,000 of our 53,000 members are making extra donations now. And we do lots of advocacy work. Being the largest cycling group in the U.S. gives us a little bit of clout with decision makers. And also having that story that bike tourism affects every community. You can have day-long bike tours in cities or other places, but also those little towns that are benefiting from visiting cyclists. So that's a powerful message for lawmakers and for agency officials like at departments of transportation. And so we take advantage of that, and we have slowly built one of the best advocacy staffs, I think, anywhere in the U.S. We have a wonderful program leader named Ginny Sullivan, who was my first hire a long time ago. And she is still with us and has built so many great relationships and is working with all these officials. So we have many programs right now that we're pursuing.
And at the national level, the state level, local level?
Yeah, we tend to work more at the national and state level. So one thing that we realized, there's this fantastic resurgence in favor of cycling right now. And what we've seen in the cities is a number of small, or not small even, but advocacy groups that focus exclusively on their city. And in fact, they're usually the most popular because I think people, when they're joining a group, realize that those city groups are going to get the bike lane striped and they're going to get potholes filled. So it's very tangible and direct. And so those groups have experienced huge growth. I mean, you see city groups with 10 to 20,000 members. We tend to focus more on the rural and suburban, exurban areas, the areas in between the cities, because that's usually where those bike trips are taking place.
And those are the areas, the locations that are reaping the biggest benefit.
Oftentimes, again, like, you'll still see a lot of bike tourism in the cities, but absolutely. So we feel like it's a good complementary activity because, there's only so many advocacy resources to go around. So it makes no sense for us to focus on cities. We focus on other areas to try and improve cycling conditions.
And at the national level, having an impact on national issues that affect all of the communities.
Yeah, let me start by just saying that we work really closely where we can with groups like the Rails Trails Conservancy, the League of American Bicyclists, when it comes to Congress, because every 5 to 7 years, they pass what's called a federal transportation authorization. And that sets policy and general spending guidelines for that period of time for all modes of transportation. And beginning about 30 years ago, bikes and pedestrians finally got a dedicated share of that funding. And we still do, but it's been shrunk. We even had money for Safe Routes to School that was dedicated. That is gone now. Got cut a few years ago, which is very unfortunate. But we work very hard as a coalition to try and promote bicycling at the federal level because that's where there's huge resources. Those gas tax dollars, even though the gas tax hasn't been raised in about 20 years or 25, it's still huge amounts of money. So we want to make sure that bicycling, walking, and also transit get their fair share of those resources because it wasn't that way until about 20 or 30 years ago, and it's still a fight every time that legislation comes up. So that's why I do tell people, we love that you join Adventure Cycling, but look at your state groups, look at your local groups too, because they all play unique roles. State groups especially, and I know Kentucky is thinking and working on creating a state group, which would be just wonderful for the state and for all of us. But they often work with departments of transportation at the state level, and DOTs, as they're known, are really important because they tend to get big chunks of money from the federal government, and then they decide where the money goes for projects. So if we want a good trail, if we want a good shoulder, if we want good bike lanes, oftentimes the state group's going to help make sure that the DOT does the right thing.
So Kentucky needs to get more active in working with our DOT.
Yeah, you have a lot of wonderful people and groups already, but a state group, and only I'd say about 10 states have really effective state groups. They're hard to keep going because a lot of people will give their money to the national groups or the local groups, but state groups are important too.
Well, wonderful. Well, it's time for another break, and we'll be back with you in a few moments talking about how we can make the world a better place through cycling. Welcome back to Bike Talk on Lexington Community Radio. I'm your host, Wanda Bertram. Today we are with Jim Sayer, who is the Executive Director of Adventure Cycling. And we've been talking about all the wonderful ways people can get out and enjoy the roads all across the country, and about advocacy and the importance of getting involved at the local, state, and national level.
Yeah, we work at the federal level to try and get Congress and the White House to do the right thing. But then most of our projects are actually much more collaborative. We are creating a U.S. bicycle route system, which is an official system where departments of transportation designate and sign specific routes that are bike-friendly routes all over the country. So eventually this will be an integrated interstate bicycle route system.
And this is different. This is apart from
your adventure cycling, right?
Your adventure cycling routes.
Right. These are the departments of transportation designate these routes, and sometimes they'll use our routes, but sometimes they won't. And there are places where our routes don't go where they might need a route. So it's exciting to have a pro-bicycle agenda item for the departments of transportation. And so now we have 26 states that have designated routes, including, I believe, 4 in Kentucky so far. And they're signing those routes, but we've got 26 states total that have done routes, and then 13,000 miles have been designated. So our goal is to create a system with at least 50,000 miles of routes, and that would be the biggest official route network anywhere in the world. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it's a really exciting project and a lot of volunteers involved, so we always welcome volunteers. We also are working with Amtrak. We actually provide staff support for a task force that helps Amtrak be more bike friendly. So we've now got more roll-on or checked service, as they call it, where you can just roll your bike on. You don't have to box it. You just have to make a reservation, and they'll have facilities so you can just hang your bike on a special hanger for bicycles. So this is really nice so that you can ride one way and take a train the other, or find a way to build that into your trip planning. So that's been exciting because Amtrak was very resistant for years, and then through our members' calls for change and then being able to do that task force, Amtrak finally said, okay, we'll work with you. And now they're very excited about having this new market segment where cyclists want to create a multimodal trip, as they call it.
Yeah, and that's a very important point because it sounds like you're working very hard to integrate this U.S. cycling route with other modes of transportation.
Exactly. And we also have formal partnerships with the National Park Service, and we work with the State Park Directors Association because they're interested in providing more facilities for cyclists too. And in fact, state parks are increasingly doing something called hiker-biker sites, which are sites exclusively for people who get to the park under their own power. I have
seen some of those.
Yeah, and that's great for them because they're such small spaces. They don't have to provide the parking pad for a car or an RV. So they love these because they can enable people to get in there and use a small amount of space and enjoy the parks that way. They also have, in 10 states now, a no-turn-away policy, which means that even if you get there and the campground is technically full, and this is at some national parks, but also state parks, if it's technically full, they'll still allow a cyclist or a hiker to come in because they know they can find a space for them. They just don't need that much space. So,
right.
So that's wonderful too to see these state park systems stepping up on that front too. But national parks too are increasingly doing car-free days in the parks, and they're opening parts of their parks only to cyclists or to hikers.
I had not heard that one. That's
and we actually
extremely interesting.
We just finished working with the National Park Service on a guide for people-powered parks. That's what they call them. And their official research unit did the report, and it's available online. You can find it through the Adventure Cycling site because we have loads of resources that give best practices for becoming more bike and walk friendly for people who want to use our parks without a car.
Well, and I know there are national parks also that have days that you can, it may just be one day of a week where the road is closed to anything except cyclists.
Right. But these are really big deals where they're doing these car-free days. They just did the first one on the Shenandoah Ridge. They've done several now on Crater Lake, around Crater Lake, which would be, can you imagine how cool that would be just to ride car-free? And places like Glacier National Park near me, they usually have 1 to 2 weeks where you can do going to the Sun Road car-free. They've plowed it, and they don't allow cars to go up, so you can ride all the way up to Logan Pass and up that gorgeous terrain without worrying about cars, just taking your time. It's amazing, and do the same in Yellowstone as well for a whole month, usually every year, where you can ride car-free through the park.
I love how this is progressing.
Yeah.
Where is it going next? What are the next steps?
Well, we're going to keep doing this advocacy work. We've actually planned to add another staff person to do even more on safety advocacy, on things like rumble strips and making sure there's no rumble strips where they're not needed or they get in the way of safe riding or where they're just not done right. Chip seal, how it's done, make sure it's really smooth so it's not that really awful kind like in parts of Texas where you just rattles your teeth when you're riding on it.
Yeah, because people complain about those in cars. You should get on a bike and see what it feels like.
Oh, exactly. So, and we're also zeroing in on areas which have a higher propensity for, car-bicycle crashes, and we want to find out why is that happening, how can they make improvements. So we'll look for the real trouble spots around the country, maybe on our routes or U.S. bicycle routes, and see how we can work with DOTs or local officials to try and improve those roads. So I think those are some of the big things we're doing, and we want to work with volunteers. We work with them often on these kinds of projects. And the other big volunteer project we have is a wonderful, very inclusive couple of events that we started on our 40th anniversary in 2016. And the first one is called Bike Travel Weekend. It's the very first weekend of June every year. And what we do is we ask people to create their own DIY bike trips, a 1 or 2 night trip during that weekend. And they can either do it with friends and family, or they can invite others to join in, but they'll log it into a special page on our website, and you can see the hundreds and hundreds of events. And in fact, people are doing them all over the world because they can.
Wow.
So last year we had about 10,000 people doing a little over 1,000 events. And this was the third year we've done it. And we wouldn't it be great to even have like 100,000 people? Because there's no real upper barrier to this. It's just who wants to get out there and do a DIY, do-it-yourself event. So that happens the first weekend of June. And the other one is, and it's going to be in late September.
These are typically in September.
It's called Bike Your Park Day. And you can do any kind of ride for one day or an overnight. And again, we have a special page on our website where you can register your ride. You can either invite people in to do it with you, or you can make it your own event just for friends or family or solo. We don't really care. The whole idea is for you to be creative, do what you want, and it's just a wonderful thing. And it doesn't have to be an epic trip. We had one group of families in Seattle that what they did for Bike Travel Weekend is there are about 40 of them, a bunch of families. They booked the group campsite on Bainbridge Island. They rode about 2 miles through Seattle, got to the ferry station, got on the ferry station, rode about 5 or 6 miles to the campground, and that was it. And
that was it.
They had s'mores, they had their dinner, they had everything all set up at the campsite, and it was just a great, great intro for the families and the kids especially, because they felt so powerful that they were able to ride. And then, of course, they came back the next day.
Great way to get started. You had talked about how that barrier, jumping over that barrier to get on your bike and spend a night rather than just doing a day.
Right.
That's a great entry into
that.
Yeah.
So anyways, we have hundreds of volunteers who set up those events, and you can do it too. And you don't have to be a member of Adventure Cycling. If you go to our website and look up Bike Your Park Day or Bike Travel Weekend, you'll find out what it's about and put it on your calendar, and then start planning for doing the trip, because you might be doing a bike ride anyway, so why not make it part of a mass movement? Because again, imagine hundreds of thousands of people on the same weekend hitting the campgrounds and lodges and hotels of America or the world at the same time, and all these innkeepers and campgrounds.
So what's going on, man?
Hosts are going, yeah, how come there's all these cyclists? And generally they'll say, oh, this is awesome. And then eventually we'll get to the point where we'll make Bike Travel Weekend every weekend.
Yeah. Well, I have some friends who did that, and they just started downtown, parked at the Legacy Trailhead, biked out to the horse park, camped overnight at the horse park, and it just a really cool overnight weekend thing to do. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
We can participate in that here.
But when you do bike overnights, you remember you can just ride 10 miles. All you have to do is take a toothbrush and a credit card and maybe one change of clothes. So
yeah, I might need a little more than that.
Whatever works for you.
A little higher maintenance.
We just tell people that they don't have to have a fancy bike or fancy gear to do it. They can just take the bike they have in their garage and just go a few miles, and they're doing a bike trip.
So, Jim, we're about out of time, unfortunately, because I've loved talking with you today. Tell us the website URL once again. So if people want information, they want to get more involved, they want to volunteer, they want to become a member, just have those tools to get out and start doing this.
Yeah, adventurecycling.org. If you're still in the phone age, it's 800-755-BIKE. And you can call us and we'll answer in Missoula, Montana, or we'll get back to you if you leave a message. And you can go through all the social media channels, whether it's Facebook or Pinterest or Instagram, and you'll see lots of good stuff there that'll inspire you and inform you about bicycle travel.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, and thanks for being on our show today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And don't forget to tune in to Bike Talk at the same time next week for all things cycling, helping you get out, explore towns and countryside in Lexington and beyond and beyond and beyond. Thanks for joining us. Be safe and enjoy the ride. Bluegrass Cycling Club is proud to support Bike Talk as an underwriter for Lexington Community Radio. For more information, you can visit bgcycling.net.